In this video, I want to take a look at the pseudocodes of the DemoDimmer project. In DemoDimmer project, demodimmer.c file, we have some functions. In fact, we have 3 different channels which simulates 3 different devices. For example, channel 3 for dimmer, channel 2 for sensor button, channel 1 for push button, and many of them has its related functions. For example, dimmer has the evaluation object, DimmerCycle, dimmer init, dimmer set dimmer LEDs. Sensor buttons have do DimmerSensorEvent and GetPushButtons, and start stop push button has do PushButtonTimedEvent and GetPushButtons. And we start from DA evaluate input objects. They evaluate input object, evaluating received communication object. Then it received a communication object if it's COCH3 switch or COCH2 switch. In fact, the difference is that COCH2 is the communication object which sensor button sends, and COCH3 is the communication object which dimmer receives. And if we want to send a message from sensor and receive that by the dimmer, we should use the equal name for them. For example, it sends COCH2 switch and it receives COCH2 switch. However, by testing ETS, there is no matter what you are using. When it's COCH3 switch, data set point initialized with object A switch. In fact, A switch goes into the set point. And by this, it's turn on the light or turn off the lights according to the value of the COCH3 switch communication object value. If our received communication object is COCH3 value, then A value instead the set point is initialized with A value, current set point, and it start to change the luminance of light with the value between 0 to 256 or between 0 and 100%. Change the luminance of lamp with this value. When received communication object is COCH3 dimming, we check the press button and we check the value of dimming. In fact, if it's dimming communication object, we check A dimming. We check this one, A dimming. And if the value is a number between 9 and F, we should increase the luminance. We should increase the luminance of the lamp by increasing the set point, of course. If the number is between 1 and 7, then we try to decrease the luminance by decrease the set point. Get the set point. If the value is 0 or 8, then in fact it means that the user releases the button, or the button has been released. So the set point gets the value as a fixed number, and the current value becomes the set point for our dimmer. it stop counting, it stop increasing or decreasing the luminance of the lamp. If the received communication object is COCH to read time the start stop, then the timer TM actor delay start timing, in this example for 6 seconds. In fact, we enable a delay maker timer, which is name is TM actor delay. This timer. And we put on our 256 for our set point. And if this timer expired after a while, this timer expired, for example after 6 minutes, it's try to go off, of course gradually, not immediately. Another function is DimmerCycle, which perform the operation of dimmer. As you can remember, we said that after evaluating the received communication object, we try to dimming this function occur here. First, we do evaluation, which we described here. Then we do some action based on a state machine. We do dimming operation based on the state machine. The state machine are here. I described it in previous video. And then try to send COCH3 state switch and send COCH3 state value to notify the sensors button and push buttons about the status of dimmer. I described it in these pictures, these two pictures in the previous video. In the previous video, I told that there are two methods to recognize the press button. First button was in fact based on event handler, which by pressing a button, app sensor event happens. It gets the data and do some special things. Functions DoDimmerSensorEvent and DoPushButtonTimedEvent is based on the first method. So by pressing DoDimmerSensorEvent, processing the received event from the sensors and from sensors happens, and it generates and sends a related communication object. By running this function, we check the value of app sensor event, and based on the app sensor event, we assign appropriate data to the value, the data which have in app sensor event data, and send the related communication object like switching, dimming, or value for a dimmer. This state machine describes the operations. However, I described it here too. What happened? For example, when we press up button, down button, set button, one of this value inserted in app sensor event data, and the related event happens, like app relding, app ABSD, app on off, and send the related communication object to KNX network. All these happens here. And in this state machine. By pressing DoPushButton timed event, by pressing start stop push button, DoPushButton timed event happens, and this is what we have in this section of our state machine. Or here, when we press start stop, a press happens with the value of 1, and the COCH1 time the start stop is sent to KNX network. All of them is defined in this section. We check if a start stop happens, yes. If yes, then we put 1 to CH1 time the start stop, and we send COCH1 time the start stop. And what is CH1 time the start stop? This is a value which we have defined in the APP RAM. This one. And this line means these sections for switching, dimming, and value. GetPushButtons is a function which is used in channel 1, channel 2 to check the press buttons of both, and this function is called by the SC event 100 MS event every 100 milliseconds, as I described in this picture. It is the second method to recognize the pressed button. However, in this function we check the press button. If button B0 was released after a short time, in fact B0 was released after a short time, this section, then switch is off, and the buttons or sensor buttons send the COCH to switch to turn on the turn off the I should set off the sensor buttons. If the button B0 was released after a long time, we stop dimming, so we insert 0 to dim and send COCH to dimming. If button B1 was released after short time, then we put on switch and send COCH to switch to turn on. I think turn on the dimmer's lamp. If the B1 was released after a long time, then we stop dimming by putting 0 to dim and send COCH to dimming to the dimmer. If button B2 was released, then we want to activate a start stop operation on dimmer, so we put on start stop and sense your CH1 timed start stop. If button B3 was released, then we want to set a special value for luminance the lamp. For example, we set 100 for the value and sense your CH2 value. This value can be a number between 0 and 256. And finally, we check if button is still has been pressed for a long time. In this case, we check if the pressed button is B0 or B1. If it's B0, in fact, we should increase the luminance, we should perform dimming, we put 1 into dimming or a related number which increase the luminance into dimming, and sense COCH to dimming to increase this. This number can be a number between 0 and 7, I think, because I changed. However, I changed this number. And if the B1 is has been pressed for a long time, then we try to increase the luminance and sending the COCH2 dimming a number, for example 9, number between 9 and 50 to increase the luminance, and it is a number between 1 to 7. I should make some changes here, 1 to 7 to decrease the luminance. I think it was for turn on and turn off. I can't remember. I defined it in turn on and turn off. Well,